Okay, good morning, everyone. So here's what we are going to do. I would request you all to kindly close your eyes and take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and imagine the wonderful blue sky. Imagine the wonderful green trees and the green grass around us, the clean water around us and the fish inside. And now take a deep breath again and try to hold it for the next 5 months. Because in Delhi, come October, we are going to face what we have been facing for the past 5 years. There would be runny eyes, itchy throat, stifling lungs, and the smoke and the air so polluting, so toxic that it would even take a lot of effort to even take one breath. Since when has living in such situations become the new normal, I say? Currently, we are living in the world where 7 out of the 10 most polluted cities in the world are currently in Delhi. Here's what is going to happen. There would be advertisements of someone selling us air purifiers, someone selling us air from Canada. Imagine the only two things that we need in the world currently are now both sold in containers in our city. There would be some startling pictures of school students going to schools with wearing masks. There would be a traffic police person managing the traffic in perhaps the air which is only 25 times more toxic than what is prescribed by the WHO. In the last years, we saw some people moving out of the city, and they're termed as something known as a pollution migrant. 7 of the 10 most polluted cities in the world are currently in India. And interestingly, out of the world's top 10 most emerging cities in the world, all of them are currently based in India as well. So the top 10 most emerging cities are in India. And now I ask, would all these cities have something what is known as, can these cities sustain the future population for next 20, 30 years? I also ask, could these cities provide us with the food and water required for the future generations? What is the carrying capacities of these cities? Or would these cities just go on forever and ever? So I've been traveling to more than 250 cities across 45 countries in the past decade to try to understand what is the future of cities. Having traveled to Beijing, Ulaanbaatar, Johannesburg, now Delhi, I must say that the future of the cities looks rather gloomy. So I changed my narrative in trying to understand what is the future of city, but then trying to change the narrative in understanding what does the cities of future look like. And suddenly, the cities of future look more positive and look more hopeful to all of us. Currently, in just a landmass of 1% of the total land, we have 85% of the GDP production in all these cities. And in order to sustain 85% of these GDP production, we essentially need an atmosphere, a system which can sustain itself. With just 1% of the land area, cities also generate a lot of waste. They generate more than 75% of the greenhouse emissions. Just 1% of the land area of the cities generate 70% of the greenhouse emissions, and they also generate more than 50% of the waste production currently in these cities. But at the same time, cities are also very interesting spheres, where people come from all over the world in search of a job. Globally, 3 million people travel to urban areas, migrate to urban areas every week in search of a grace benediction, a chance to work hard, to learn a living, and to be part of something known as a middle class. But we are also oblivious to many things around the city. First and foremost, these cities are huge materials and they have a lot of materials and nutrients in these cities. At the second time, the cities also have, especially around the cities, if you see over the years, we start from the old town, and the cities then grow into something known as a new town. And when the population starts coming in, the city becomes something known as a greater region, or as the suburbs, predominantly known in India. But these outside cities, or the peripherals of the cities, are where all the action, all the energy is, because the people who really want to make a difference and want to make a living out of it. But we are still oblivious to this population that comes in. So if I have to imagine a city, I would imagine it into two ways. A city, perhaps, which is self-sufficient in a manner, especially in terms of its own resources. A city which is green enough that provides a sanctuary to the people and the people so that they coexist with biodiversity around it. Also, and imagine a city which is so receptive and so welcoming to the people so that we use this energy and resources of people who are living in this city. So let's take a couple of examples. First example is that of agriculture. And if you remember, it is only agriculture because of which all of us live in cities. So people, the old hunter-gatherers, left their nomadic lifestyles only for agriculture. When we had agriculture, people started getting in together, they started living together, which resulted into food production, and this food production resulted into trade, and thereby forming an ecosystem where people were living in and around the city. Interestingly, now, these cities, agriculture is now marginalized to something which is outside the city. And there is hardly any agriculture within these cities. So I come up with one concept that is known as Agrotech Chur. Imagine, what if the cities could develop their own ecosystems? Why can't our Indian cities take the lead and stay these so-called emerging cities where all the schools, all the universities, all the government buildings grow their own food? Why can't our architecture and the people who are designing buildings already incorporate the principles of urban farming? Can we not have these cities that feed themselves? In Singapore, actually, in 2010, just like New Delhi, there was a huge cloud of pollution which was coming essentially from Malaysia. And in Malaysia, at that time, the tropical forests were being cut down so that new palm oil plantations could come up. And Singapore did something what Delhi did not do, is to think in terms of sustainability. They changed the vacant parking spots, the malls, and all the commercial buildings were quickly transformed into urban farms. And as a result, today, more than 60% of the greens that are consumed by Singapore comes from its own buildings. Can we not do the same in India and in our emerging cities? I mean, is it not obvious that the people who are migrating from the cities, they would have a lot of knowledge and a lot of capacities of farming practices, and they come into cities and they, help us with these urban farms. I recently came across a very interesting term, which I think is the only one in any language, is a Japanese term known as motaitai. It is a Japanese term which conveys a sense of regretting concerning waste. It is a regret that we are wasting something. So after this talk, why don't you go back and then see on the metro or when you're taking the bus or the car, see for all the vacant spots that could be changed into an urban farm. This is a potential in our own cities to grow our own food. I mean, growing food is a very difficult job, and I cannot do it on my own. But the migrant population, which are coming from rural areas, have those capacities that needs to be utilized. The second solution that I think is around something known as urban mining. And like in our cities, we have tremendous amount of minerals and metals. More than 70% of the buildings that are going to be present in 2030 in India are still not developed. Can you imagine the amount of resources we would need to develop these buildings? In our cities, we have more than 400 million tons of aluminium. If we just recycle that aluminium, the amount of energy required is hardly 5% instead of extracting fresh resources. Imagine a noble thing as your mobile phone. Every mobile phone has at least 60 elements, and most of them are rare elements. There are rare elements like palladium, silver, gold, indium, and at the capacities as we are now consuming our mobile phones, all these metals are going to go extinct, and we are not able to find essential elements to make our mobile phones. I am a firm believer in karma and rebirth, and I always ask, why can't mobile phones be reborn as mobile phones? Why can't our televisions be recycled to form televisions? Why does every mobile phone has to end up in a landfill after its own life cycle? So we need to think in these systems. So what I am proposing is to close the loops, closing the technical cycles in terms of buildings and also in terms of mobile phones, and also closing the biological loops in terms of the food that is grown in our cities. So here's the thought for the day. In 2000, there were 370 cities with a population of 1 million people. In 2019, there are more than 550 cities with a population of 1 million people. And in 2030, the amount of cities with more than 1 million people would shoot up to 730 cities across the globe. If we as India want to develop an economy which is $5 trillion strong, then we need to celebrate our cities, the powerhouses, the people that are within these cities, and can we think of an economy that is a shift from a manufacturing economy to a recyclable economy? Thank you.